Here we have question number 12, and this is from the SAT number 10. This is the May 2017 test. And question 12 says the author's central claim in the passage is that something. So this is also kind of like a big picture question because we're asking sort of like basically the big idea. What's the big idea of the passage? What is the author's central claim? What's her main point in this passage? And typically the way that I suggest that students will solve this is by going to the beginning, going to the introductory paragraph, going to that little blurb and the subtitle and the title to help us sort of like localize or locate what the central claim of the passage is. And then the second thing is just having a general comprehension and memory of the text to help you sort of know what's right and what's wrong. So if I go back up here, if I'm going to say what's the central claim of the passage, I'm going to look at the title, which talks about the injustice of, wow, look at that line. The injustice of mental subordination. So we could say that the passage, one of the claims is that women are experiencing injustice, particularly in the mind, in the realm of the mind, the things that they're allowed to think, and in terms of education. So that's important. And then this first paragraph here basically says, you know, women, no matter what they do, are criticized. If they act this way or that way, they're criticized. So maybe something along those lines could be our correct answer choice. And actually, so what I'm going to do with this question is as I go through A, B, C, and D for this, I'm going to recognize that all of these answer choices have to do with education. A says women have as much right to a rigorous education. B says women are hindered from fully developing. C says education. D says methods of education. So all of these are basically about the SAT is saying the central claim of this passage has to do with education and the state of women's education according to the author of the passage. Now, in my mind, that may not actually be what the central claim of the passage is. I actually think that the passage concerns a lot more. Here it talks about happiness between men and women. Here it talks about women basically being the foundation of all that's good in society. Up here it talks about women basically being criticized no matter what they do. And only really this paragraph here talks about women's education. But it doesn't matter. This is all of the answer choices here are saying that the SAT is calling the central claim something to do with education. So all we have to do at this point is go back and basically say, what does the passage say about women in relationship to their education? So up here, the whole claim, if you watch the video on the passage outline, you're going to remember that basically her claim here is that women are sort of given like a half-pregnant form of education, right? They're basically not allowed to learn completely. They're not given full majesty and liberty to understand things, but they're given like a little taste. You may read, you may think is what men say to women, but you can only think within certain boundaries that men set up for women. So the answer choice A says women have as much right to a rigorous education as men have. So for this to be right, we would have to see some evidence in the passage where basically the author's point of view is saying that women have as much right to education as men have, that it's an equal right for both men and women. And this answer choice is actually not going to be correct. And I think the reason why it's incorrect is because the author doesn't really make the case that men and women have this equal right. It's probably true that she believes that they do, but it's sort of almost taken as assumed. It's sort of taken as the foundation of her argument to begin with. Because she doesn't really spend any time making the case that they have this right. She just sort of assumes that they do, and then basically complains and points out that women are not receiving the same quality of education as men or allowed to think in terms of men. So even if they have the same right, it's more like the exercise of that right is not equal. So A is not a good answer choice. B says that the central claim of the passage is that women are hindered from fully developing and using their intellectual capabilities. And I think that this is right because the complaint in the paragraph that we see for this passage is basically that women are only given a little bit. They're given a little learning, but not entire. They're not allowed to get a full comprehensive education. So I think this is a good answer choice and that we should keep it and come back to it. C says that the author's central claim in the passage is that education has prevented women from realizing their goals rather than helping meet them. I also don't think that this is really good as an answer choice because nowhere in the passage does the author say that the education they've gotten, although she does say that the sort of the half pregnant form of education that they've received is harmful in some ways. She doesn't really make the case that education is preventing them from realizing their goals. I think if anything, that sort of has a negative connotation or gives a negative connotation towards getting a full education, whereas it's pretty clear that the author would be in favor of women receiving a more full, comprehensive education. So because she never really makes this claim, and because it goes kind of counter towards the author's spirit in general, we should get rid of this answer choice. Then we have D, which says that methods of education need to be developed that appeal equally to men and to women. And I also don't think that this is a good answer choice because the author's point is not that the education that exists only appeals to men. It's basically that the education that exists only is available to men and not towards women. So her point is not we need two different types of education, one that will appeal to men, one that will appeal to women, because right now it's only appealing to men. Her point is that women just need to have the full rights to education, or not even the full rights, but they need to have the full exercise of rights as men do. So we can get rid of D. And that's going to leave us with answer choice B, which says that women are hindered from fully developing and using their intellectual capabilities. And I'll just go back to maybe try to find some education to prop, or a sentence to prop that up. And I think there's more than a few, but I think maybe down here that man says you may read and you will think, but you should not evince your knowledge or employ your thoughts beyond the boundaries which we have set up around you. So there's boundaries set up around their education. Here she's characterizing it as being a little learning, right? And then I think also, yeah, I think those are the main ones, and the rest sort of just match the spirit of it, right? She's not permitted to assert a majesty of mind, so she's not really allowed to have sovereignty or control over her mind or the education that she has. So for all those reasons, we're going to choose answer choice B for our correct answer for question number 12.